All right, so welcome once again, teachers and administrators, to our Eloquence webinar. My name is Pete Chavez, and I will be the host for today. Our topic today is multi-level classrooms. And we're going to be talking about ELs, and you're going to hear some acronyms like, for example, ELs, ELL, ESL. Keep in mind that this is referring to a group of students that haven't reached proficiency in English. So it basically means all the same thing. So during this webinar, we're going to be defining what is a multi-level classroom. And just like in anything, there's going to be challenges and there's going to be some advantages of using the multi-level approach. So during this webinar, make sure you're taking notes down, because we are going to share with you some activities that teachers, you'll be able to use this afternoon, or you'll be able to use it in your lesson plan tomorrow. And I know as teachers, we appreciate these activities because it's May, you've probably used up all your activities, and you appreciate any activity you can use with your students, especially being almost the end of May. So with that in mind, at the end of this webinar, by the way, we are going to have questions and answers. So make sure you're documenting your questions and feel free to type them into the chat box. And at the end, we're gonna do our best to answer any questions that you have. And if for some reason we can't answer your question, we will make sure that if you provide us your email address, we will provide you an email answering the question that you left here for us. So with that in mind, we do have Brenda Rosas with us. Brenda is considered an EL expert, and this is why. She has vast experience and also vast knowledge of education. She has a bachelor's in Chinese, and she also has a master's in English TESOL. And TESOL is teaching English to speakers of other languages. So a lot of experience I can see. And we're going to hear something great here with Brenda, is that at one time she had 39 students in her class. Imagine that, 39 students. That's not the amazing part. The amazing part is that she actually had students from 5th grade all the way to 12th grade, and they were all at different levels. So you could just imagine that. I mean, I'm really curious to hear how you did that, so I'm looking forward to that. Also, Brenda is the primary author of Eloquence. Eloquence is a complete EL digital curriculum for students grades 6 through 12. She is the author, and we're just so excited to have her here. Eloquence is actually part of Thesys International. Is located in Anaheim, California, really close cities. So with further ado, let's go ahead and talk to Brenda. Brenda, once again, thank you for being here with us. Brenda, so how would you define a multi-level classroom?
So a multi-level classroom is normally defined when there are students of different English proficiencies or language proficiencies studying together in the same classroom. Sometimes we also have different grade levels as multi-levels. So you might have a 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade student all studying together, or high school students all in the same classroom. However, a single level classroom can also be seen as a multi-level classroom, and we might not think of it as a multi-level classroom. When they're in a single level, that means their English proficiency level average is the same. But their reading might be higher, their speaking might be lower, their writing may be somewhere in between. So the idea is that students in a single level class may have differing abilities for different skill levels and still be seen or feel to the teacher as multi-level.
Yeah. Now I remember when I was a principal at a middle school in Monterrey, I remember that also Pushin and Pullout was very common. So what's the difference in regards to these two approaches?
Right. So push-in is when in their schedule it's mainly just mainstream classrooms. Students go in, they learn their content area, subject area type classes, and then an ESL teacher goes into their classroom to assist in the EL development or proficiency. Now they'll be working on the same curriculum that the whole class is learning. The ESL teacher may be interpreting or helping them with the different material. Now, a pull-out program is when it's still not scheduled in their daily list of classes, but students are pulled out maybe in small groups or by grade level or by skill level, and the EL teacher then works with those students for maybe 20-30 minutes a day, assisting them still maybe on the curriculum of the classrooms or on something supplemental where they're trying to increase their English proficiency.
And how about sheltered instruction? Because that's another hot buzzword that we hear at schools. Well, how would you define sheltered instruction?
Right. So sheltered instruction is when it is actually built into their schedule. So maybe period 5, there's an ESL class or an ELL class or ESL class. We have a lot of different terms for these types of classes. It can be 1 period a day, 2 periods a day, a block. But the idea is that it is a dedicated time for the teachers to teach students about English language development. They are learning reading, writing, listening, speaking skills, increasing English proficiency to then get ready for those mainstream classrooms or the classrooms they're taking alongside, but really to reclassify them into no longer taking ESL.
Yeah, thank you for sharing these examples with us. Now, going back to the multi-level classroom, what are some goals that a teacher and administrator may have in regards to this approach?
Right, so you always need to engage students. If you are able to engage a student, they're going to want to learn. It has to be relevant. They're then going to want to learn the material and practice, interact with the other students, and then really that increases their English proficiency. So practice leads to English proficiency levels going up. When that happens, their goal is always to reclassify them, but always to focus on reading, writing, listening, and speaking skills.
Yeah, I remember as the middle school principal, that was our goal, to reclassify the ELs before they go into high school.
And as quickly as possible.
Oh yes, definitely. So, thank you for giving us these examples in regards to these different approaches, but let's talk real quick about the single level classroom. Is this really possible to have in a school a single level? How easy is it to obtain this kind of a class? Tell me your thoughts in regards to that.
So a single level classroom is obviously the most ideal for a teacher. Okay, you always want to have a single level classroom because it makes it so you have one set of curriculum, one set of materials. The students are generally at the same level. You teach them, you can differentiate a little here and there, but it's a lot more controlled. However, for an administrator, single level is not ideal when building a master schedule. To schedule a single level class means that you need a large enough ESL population or ESL teaching staff or maybe a medium size. It really depends, but the idea is you need class space, okay? You need so classroom space, and you do need to set it up a little bit differently.
Yeah, so maybe right now we have an assistant principal in charge of curriculum and instruction, and maybe he's not really familiar with the multi-level. Maybe it's their first year as an administrator. What tips, what advice would you give this administrator?
Yes, so we can think of single level as the most ideal, but don't be married to that idea. Be open to the idea that multi-level is possible. It does work. It is a great program to run. So when you do multi-level scheduling, you always have to keep into account that there are regular classes. For example, science, history, math. Students need to be scheduled for these classes. They usually take priority. Math is also a multi-level subject, even though we don't think of it like that. An 8th grader might have Math A. Another 8th grader is going to take Algebra 1. So they need to be scheduled for that first. Then you have your ESL class, maybe as 3rd or 4th priority. But the idea is if you can somehow get the ESL schedule to go every period, then you will have more room for flexibility in scheduling. For example, when I was teaching at Cornerstone Academy, I had 5th through 12th grade in one classroom.
Wow.
Now this is not ideal, okay? Let's be very clear. 39 students, and they were all at different levels. The way that happened was I was the only ESL teacher. I taught periods 1 through 7, all different classes. So at any given point, students can be put into my classroom and work on English proficiency. So as an administrator, we have to be open to the idea that students can be at different grade levels, different proficiency levels all mixed together, and even different languages.
And right now in May, a lot of the teachers are getting their assignments for September or for August. And so let's say I'm a new teacher and I'm just told that I'm going to have a multi-level class next school year. What are some challenges that I can expect, and also the administrator be expecting this upcoming school year?
So let's start with the teacher. For the teacher, there is a lot more work involved in multi-level classrooms. Let's just be honest. Lots more planning, lots more time teaching, because you can't just do direct instruction. So let me just give you an idea. So if you are a science teacher, you're expected to teach biology to your students. Imagine in one classroom trying to teach biology to this group, physics to this group, and chemistry to the other group within the same time frame, within the same class period. You can't just do direct instruction to everyone. Mm-hmm. So the idea there is you really want students to be able to learn all the material that they need to learn, not everyone else's. So preparation time is going to be a lot longer. So it's very important to have a set curriculum so that teachers can already use that and follow along.
Yeah, and talking about, preparing your lesson plans, writing your curriculum, you mentioned that it takes much more time. Yes. Can you expand a little bit in regards to that, just so that way as a teacher they're prepared?
Right. So let me just give you the example of when I was teaching at Cornerstone Academy. I had 5 different levels of ESL in that one classroom. I could not just take one reading and say, okay everyone, we're all going to read the advanced reading now. The beginners might not even understand what I just said. Mm-hmm. So what I had to do was take that one reading and write it for the advanced, the high intermediate, the intermediate, the low intermediate, the beginning, the zero English. The idea is that you write it so many different ways so they are responsible for their material. Mm-hmm. Now, a program like that is not sustainable. I am constantly writing new material.
I can imagine.
Yeah, because if you're a low-level student, the next year you're going to intermediate, they can't use the same material. Mm-hmm. So that's why Eloquence was born. That idea of I had to get help out there because I went through a whole publishing company of books from different authors, different publishers, and could not find a good multi-level curriculum for secondary, 6 through 12. Mm-hmm. So what we did at Eloquence was we put together different levels and made them all structured in the same way so you could do the same type of activity but different topics. Students were working on different topics in the same classroom. Teachers could give direct instruction to small groups, but I never had to keep writing the material year after year to be different.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit here about classroom management, because like you mentioned, you had some students that were at the beginning stages, others were intermediate, advanced. When you're teaching the class and you're teaching to the kids that really are learning barely English, the kids that are intermediate or advanced, they're kind of getting bored.
Yeah.
So how did you do it so that way everybody is engaged?
So first of all, again, writing the material to different levels, setting tasks. So small tasks, bite-sized tasks. Here is your 10-minute task. You need to complete this and show me in 10 minutes while I work with other students in different levels. So for example, I go to the beginners first. I explain to them what they need to work on. They start. Then the next level up, then the next level. The advanced students can already be starting on their own, doing independent study, more like reading on their own, previewing vocabulary on their own. But the tasks are so small, if you just say, okay, here's your task, you have an hour, they're going to do it in the last 10 minutes, not the hour. And you also mentioned how the advanced students may get bored. Well, obviously their tasks are going to be much more challenging. Their material is going to be much more challenging. You can't just teach one material to the middle of the class. You're going to lose the low level and you're going to lose the high level.
Yeah. So let's talk about technology here for a bit. So what's the role of technology in a multi-level classroom?
Normally, technology is used to assist the teacher. We can never let technology take over the teaching because then why would teachers be here, right? So the idea is that you want technology to give the teacher time to work individually and give direct instruction. So for example, if I build something on technology like a Quizlet, Quizlet is a free program that teachers can use out there. You set up the Quizlets or you have the students set up their own. They're working on a task with vocabulary. At that same time, you as a teacher are giving direct instruction to the other levels, teaching them vocabulary so they have something to work on. It's assisting. It's not doing the teaching. Doing the teaching would look like, okay, everyone, set up your Quizlets, go learn your vocabulary. Here's your test. You never explain anything. You never get them to speak anything. They really need that practice.
Yeah, and no doubt right now our teachers or administrators are listening to this webinar. They probably have some questions. And I encourage you to write those questions in the little chat box area there. and we're going to answer these the last 5 minutes of our webinar. So coming back to technology, what are some pitfalls that a teacher may fall into because they're using technology in the classroom?
Yes, so the biggest pitfall is horrible when a teacher says, oh, I got a classroom of computers, I got some Google Chromebooks, I need to use technology, students go. They sit there at their desk, bell rings, students are done, they then check on the back end, and you lose the teaching moments. So the pitfall is they put them on a program. If it's an adaptive program, that may be even more detrimental to the students, because what happens is then they're just doing over and over practice, or they're moving to the next level, and the teachers really have no idea. I'm not saying it's a bad program, it's just it can't be used in that fashion. So we believe in blended learning. Blended learning is the best way to teach, where internet access is necessary, technology is necessary, but it assists the teacher. The teacher is a facilitator, a teacher, a coach. They use the technology for 15 minutes. They come back, they share with the class. They do a task. They then come back, share with the class. You have little stations where they can work on it and they rotate through them. A lot of different ways to set up blended learning, really getting that technology into play, assisting the teacher in the learning, but not taking over the instruction.
Yeah, it sounds like the way Eloquence is set up that it makes it very fun for the student, because you're really focusing on these 4 domains. And what's been your experience when the curriculum is real world, when it's fun? What tends to happen to the students in your class?
So you actually get to see them mature in front of your eyes. You can see a 5th grader now talking about a real world issue when maybe even in a normal 5th grade classroom he didn't get that opportunity. So the idea is that they are learning real world. They then have content to then talk about and make intelligent conversation with someone else. And that's what you want to prepare them for, to be able to speak out later in their mainstream classroom, to feel confident, to find their voice. And that's really important. But the main thing is, when you make it relevant, when you make it challenging, they want to practice, they want to study, and they want to push each other on.
Yeah. My experience as a principal was when I'm talking to the students out on the playground, I can tell right away which was their favorite class, and I understood why. Just because it was engaging, it was fun, it just addressed, all the areas that really the kids need in order to progress to that proficiency level. So we've spoken about the challenges, but now let's talk about the advantages of a multi-level classroom. This is where the teachers are probably anxious to take notes down, because they want to know, why should I actually use the multi-level or continue with the multi-level classroom?
Right. So let's just say this, multi-level classrooms, it's my passion. I love teaching a multi-level classroom. Whenever given the choice, I would choose a multi-level classroom, not a single level. It's like you can't go back. Multi-level is so complex. It's dynamic. It's a fun, engaging learning environment, if, of course, the teacher sets it up correctly. And the students, they become united with the single goal of learning English. That's why they're there. So let's imagine for a second you're in a single level classroom, intermediate. A low-level student in that classroom is only going to know that I need to get past the highest student, which is still intermediate. In a multi-level classroom, the low-level student knows I need to get all the way past that top student. Oh, that top student just went into mainstream? It's totally doable. It encourages them. It gives them hope. It shows them the roadmap of how to get out of ESL and learn that English.
So you mentioned in regards to the kids become united.
Yes.
Can you explain to us how that process actually develops with the students? Because kids can be in 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, and they're all working together. How does that actually occur?
Right. So the very most important thing is you have to, as a teacher, create a safe learning environment. If the students feel safe, they're going to participate, they're going to interact. Friendly competition. So for any activity, a vocabulary, reading, speaking activity, if you have a game that's coming and they already know who's on their team, or they know that it could be anyone, you want to be sure you know your material. You don't want to be the one holding your team back, especially if you're a 10th grader and you have a 5th grader on your team, or 8th grader, smaller age gap. But the idea is you really do want to push each other to practice. So the little 5th grader will say to the 7th grade, hey, did you study? We're going to be on the same team. We have to win this time. And then they pretty much friendly, by friendly means, encourage each other to to study, compete, to practice, to then, of course, it leads to fluency.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that competition that occurs in the classroom. Because I remember when I was teaching in the classroom, I would have activities. But usually what happened was that those kids that knew the information were the ones that were participating, and we had some quiet ones. So how do you do it so all students participate in your activities?
Right. So the key is wait time. Wait time is an ESL term that we talk about all the time. The low-level students need more wait time. The high-level students don't. So if a teacher asks a question to the whole class, you're always going to get the, I know the answer, I know the answer. And then when they answer, they're going to say it, and then the low-level students have no chance. They don't even listen to the question anymore. So you need to structure an activity that creates more wait time. And the way you do that is you ask, maybe you put them in certain rows. This row, row 1, can you answer this question? But you know the row 1 students are all the beginners or the intermediates, whatever your leveling is. But the idea is then you increase wait time. Another way is you ask the question, everyone write down the answer. Then you can call on anybody. And this works for content area classes too.
So now you're talking about competition and in regards to some activities. Could you maybe provide an activity to teachers that they can maybe use this afternoon or tomorrow with their students?
Right. My favorite one that is like zero preparation. It's going to work nicely now at the end of the year because everybody has a word list, vocabulary for finals, whatever subject area you're teaching. All you need is their word list, their vocabulary list. The teacher is up at the front, puts on the board team names, team partners, and then students are partnered by level. So Pete and I are beginners. We have our beginning word list. You have 2 more students out there, Rebecca and Akira. They're intermediates. And the idea then is that they have their own word list. Ours are different, obviously. So we're responsible for our own vocabulary. So a race for sentences happens when the teacher gives a time limit, maybe 25 minutes. At those 25 minutes, we're going to see which team has the most points. The way you score points is by using our vocabulary correctly in a context. So we make a sentence. So you and I can decide, oh, let's just write one vocabulary word sentences. Let's go quickly and get our points up there. We could say, let's try to sit here and think of 5 words to put in one sentence as our strategy. So we are racing. As soon as we finish one sentence, we go up, we show the teacher. The teacher reviews it. Instant informal assessment. Okay? Which words do Pete and Brenda they don't understand certain words, right? The teacher can then informally assess everyone as they're coming up and doing sentences, and then put scores on the page, on the screen. And the idea then is you can see how many points you have, how many more you need to try to compete, but most importantly, you're working with vocabulary. You're putting it in a new context. You're practicing it. Teachers getting informal assessment, game over. The teacher can then go over the common errors.
No, that's great. I really love informal assessment because as a teacher, you could actually use the feedback from the students to actually just tweak your lesson plan to address the needs that the students have. You also mentioned about time limitation. How important is the kids knowing how long they're going to be participating in this activity? How crucial is it?
Right. So time is always important. If it's too long, they'll get bored. Teachers can always call time whenever they feel the class energy is going down. And again, going back to those small tasks, time is always important. If they know they have too much time, they're not going to do it. You need to put a little bit of pressure on them, light a little fire under them. And so that way you can keep the class engaged and moving.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Is there another activity that maybe you'd like to share with the teachers?
There is. So we always talk about a speaking and listening activity called Fluency Lines. That's one of my favorites. It's speaking, listening, and writing. Could be all of them combined. So the idea is that you have 2 lines. You have your speakers and your listeners, and they could be multi-level. So you and I could be partners, but you're a higher level and I'm a lower level. Our writing topics may be different, or we're getting prepared to write. But the idea is as you increase more and more round rotations, you're practicing more and more fluency. Maybe the first time we have our writing in front of us, the next 3 times we do, after that it disappears. But if you formally do this and you keep practicing, they can then formally give a presentation at the end and feel very practiced.
Yeah, and that's the goal of all the teachers, for the students to be able to express themselves in their own words.
Yeah.
Great, and I can see in the chat box how we have questions coming in from the viewers, the teachers that are present here with us, maybe even some administrators. So thank you for sharing all this insight with us in regards to multi-level classrooms. And just like we promised at the beginning of this webinar, we are going to answer questions that you have. So looking here at the chat box, we're going to start here with Brandon. Brandon has a great question for you, Brenda. How many ELs would you recommend a classroom to have?
Yes. So for multi-level classrooms, the more students, it really does increase the headache for the teacher, honestly. I would say, well, research shows 17 is a great number.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime you have up to 17 students, you're in a comfortable learning environment.
Mm-hmm.
And that is because you have enough students for small groups,
Mm-hmm.
and you also don't have too many. Now, if you have 5 or 2, that's a little bit harder to do, because then you have maybe 5 students all at different levels. They can never partner. There's
Mm-hmm.
very little interaction. So you don't want a class too tiny, but you don't want a class too large. I always say my magic number is 20. 20 is great. I feel super satisfied with how I'm teaching. I feel right on top of everything. Once 21 hits, you feel like a chicken with your head chopped off.
Mhm.
22, every one after 20, you feel it every single time.
And there's probably teachers here that have 30, 35 students in the classroom.
Or 39.
Or 39. What can they do?
Yes. So anytime that happens, you're going to just have to be more prepared than the students. More activities. Get everybody that extra talking time.
Mm-hmm.
That's when the 2-period day will be so much more important than a 1-period day, because if you do 39 into 50 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
that's not even 2 minutes for each student if you think
Yeah.
about it.
And also, as a teacher, you can talk to the administrator, see if you can get some support in the classroom, especially when you have large numbers.
Yes,
like that.
an aid would
An
be
aid.
great. Mm-hmm.
I totally
Yeah.
agree with you. There's another question here coming in from Michelle in regards to lesson planning. So I know that there's different districts that use different lesson plan layouts. So the question here is, what lesson plan layout do you recommend I use when I prepare my plans? My
Right.
lesson plans.
So PSYOP, we hear that term a lot. Teachers in their credential programs are trained in PSYOP. They take workshops on it. It's really for sheltered instruction.
Mhm.
And what's most important is, just like in Eloquence, we do this. We give background information. We give comprehensible input, something the students can understand as new material, right? We practice it. We do interaction through all these games and activities that we were just talking about. And then we review and we assess.
Mhm.
So there are 8 components,
Mhm.
and the idea is that in your lesson, you really do touch on all of those.
Yeah, and the nice thing about having it on paper is that it's a plan. You could always change it up, and that way you can address the time of the period.
Yes.
So there's another question here from David. The question says, you mentioned in the webinar about the master schedule. So here's a master schedule question.
Okay.
Do you recommend ELs in high school to be in an EL classroom for 1 period or 2 periods a day, assuming each period is 50 minutes long?
Right. Knowing master scheduling, sometimes it's even hard to get 1 period a day in.
Mm-hmm.
So at least 1 period every day would be great. But if you can ever get 2 periods, I love that 2-period block. Because right around the 35-minute mark, students really start to get engaged in the lesson. And then at 40, it's over.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
50 minutes. Okay, pack up. So it's kind of hard to get them concentrating and flowing if your periods are so short.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I love block days. So if you have a 1-period day, fine, but you have a block scheduling day,
Mhm.
it really does increase your chances to get them started on an activity and get them into that flow.
Yeah, and no doubt that if they could actually put the student in 2 periods, the student's going to progress much quicker and be able to
course.
reach that proficiency instead of only 1 period
Yes.
a day. Yeah.
Mhm.
Brenda, thanks a lot for answering these questions, and thank you for sharing your insight with us. We appreciate everybody who has participated in this webinar as well. I just want to remind everybody that you will be receiving a survey, and I do hope you complete the survey and provide some feedback to us. Maybe there's topics that you would like to hear in this webinar. Well, let us know, and we'll be more than happy to put together a webinar and answer these questions that you have. Our goal is for your students to be successful and to share our experience with you that has worked well with us. Once again, thank you for coming. And once again, my name is Pete Chavez. This is Brenda Rosas. And we sign off. And keep in mind, we got more webinars coming along the way, so check your emails. Take care. Have a great day.